I nodded. What court are you assigned to now? It was a simple question. Quiet. Almost polite. But it landed with weight. I saw the instant regret in his eyes. The realization that he'd asked it out loud, here, where it didn't belong. Before I could answer, Mara appeared at his side, looping her arm through his with practiced ease. What are you two talking about? She asked brightly. Don't tell me she's lecturing you already. I shook my head. We were just talking about work. Mara laughed. She hates talking about work. It's always boring paperwork, and nothing exciting. She turned to Daniel. Right? She never tells anyone what she does. Very mysterious. Daniel didn't laugh this time. He looked at Mara, then back at me, clearly reassessing something fundamental. I don't think that's accurate, he said slowly. The words hung there, small but disruptive. Mara frowned. What do you mean? He hesitated. Then glanced around the room, suddenly aware of how public this conversation was becoming. I think there's more to it. I could have stopped it then, redirected, smoothed it over. Years of practice had made me good at that. Instead, I stayed silent. Not out of spite, but because silence was honest. I'd spent too long editing myself for their comfort. Mara waved him off. You're overthinking it, she said. She's always been like this. Very private. A private. The word she used when she didn't understand something and didn't care to. Daniel didn't respond. His eyes stayed on me, searching for confirmation or denial. I gave him neither. I took a sip of water and felt the room subtly shift, as if something beneath the floorboards had moved. Later that night, my mother pulled me aside. You could have defended yourself, she said quietly. Not accusatory, almost pleading. People don't know you like we do. I met her gaze. They know the version you tell them. She didn't answer. On my way out, Daniel caught up with me near the door. I'm sorry, he said. For earlier. I shouldn't have. It's fine. I interrupted gently. You noticed something. That happens. He nodded, unsettled. Mara doesn't know, does she? I considered the question. She knows what she wants to know. He exhaled slowly, like someone realizing they'd stepped into deeper water than expected. As I walked to my car, the sounds of the party fading behind me, I felt an unfamiliar certainty settle in, not triumph, not fear. Just the quiet understanding that the story my sister liked to tell was beginning to crack. And once cracks appear, they have a way of spreading. The days after the engagement party passed without incident, but the atmosphere had changed. Mara called less often. When she did, her tone carried an edge. Too bright, too controlled. She asked casual questions that weren't casual at all. How was work? Was I still at the same place? Did I ever think about switching careers? I answered the way I always had, briefly, truthfully, without elaboration. At work, my routine held steady. I reviewed files, attended hearings, and moved through hallways where no one raised their voice unless it mattered. I liked the discipline of it. The way rules created boundaries even emotion couldn't cross. There was comfort in knowing that outcomes were shaped by evidence, not opinion. Still, I noticed things. Emails copied unnecessarily. Conversations that paused when I entered a room. Nothing overt. Just awareness spreading. Daniel emailed me once, professionally phrased, asking for clarification on a procedural question unrelated to the party. I responded formally, nothing more. But I understood what he was really doing, confirming. Making sure his recognition hadn't been a mistake. At the next family dinner, Mara watched me closely. She laughed when others laughed, but her eyes kept flicking toward me, measuring. At one point, she repeated the same joke she'd made at the party, about me being too serious for my own good. The table chuckled again, but the sound felt thinner this time. Daniel didn't smile. Our mother noticed. She tried to redirect, talking about wedding plans, guest lists, colors. But something had already shifted. The story wasn't landing the way it used to. After dinner, Mara followed me into the hallway. You could have said something, she whispered, irritation barely contained. You made it awkward? I didn't say anything, I replied. That's the problem, she snapped. You let people think things. I looked at her then, really looked. The confidence she wore so easily had begun to fracture around the edges. People think what you show them, I said calmly. I didn't show anything. She stared at me, unsure whether she was being insulted. A few days later, I received an official notice at work. Routine, procedural, but tied to an upcoming case that made my pulse slow, not quicken. Familiar names appeared on the page, connected names. I didn't react when she laughed at me. I'd learned long ago that silence unsettles people more than defense. My sister enjoyed performances, family dinners, celebrations, any place with witnesses. That night, she made sure everyone heard how I'd never amounted to much. How some people just fade into the background of their own lives. I let her have the moment. What she didn't know was that I recognize arrogance the same way I recognize evidence, by how confidently it exposes itself. While she spoke, I watched her fiancé. His smile slipped first. His eyes lingered on me a second too long, as if a name had finally connected to a face. I hadn't come to confront anyone. I hadn't come for validation. Everything I needed was already in motion, built carefully, lawfully, and without noise. When he finally spoke, his voice changed the room, and that's when I realized they were about to understand who had been watching all along. I learned early that in my family, volume passed for confidence. Whoever spoke loudest, joked fastest, or told the story first usually won. My sister, Mara, mastered that before she turned 16. She had a gift for turning rooms toward her, for making people laugh at exactly the right moment. I admired it once. Later, I learned to stand still inside it. We were close in age but not in temperament. Where she collected attention, I collected routine. I liked mornings that started the same way, work that required precision, evenings that didn't ask questions of me. My life looked small from the outside, I knew that. No flashy updates, no dramatic milestones. Just consistency, and a quiet sense of direction I never felt the need to explain. Mara, on the other hand, narrated everything. Her successes, her frustrations, and eventually, her theories about me. To her friends, I was the serious one. To extended family, I was still figuring things out. The phrasing changed, but the meaning didn't. I was the contrast that made her sparkle brighter. I didn't fight it. Fighting implies you want to change the outcome. I just adjusted my expectations and kept my distance where I could. We spoke often enough to keep appearances intact. Holidays, birthdays, the occasional coffee where she'd talk and I'd listen. She mistook my listening for agreement. Most people do. My days were orderly. I woke before my alarm, dressed simply, and took the same route to work every morning. I liked knowing exactly how long things took. My job required neutrality, patience, and an ability to sit with other people's worst moments without absorbing them. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. That was enough for me. Mara never asked what I did, not really. When she announced her engagement, she sent me a photo of the ring before she sent it to our parents. I congratulated her. I meant it. Her fiancé, Daniel, was polite and observant, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. I noticed that right away. The engagement party was held at a rented hall, all white linens and soft lighting meant to make everyone look kinder. Family and friends gathered in clusters, drinks in hand, laughter overlapping. I stayed near the edge, comfortable there. Mara moved through the room like she owned it. At some point, I became the story. I didn't hear the beginning, just the ripple of attention turning toward me. Mara's voice carried easily. She joked about how different we were, how I'd always been the cautious one, how some people never really leave the sidelines. The laughter that followed was automatic, practiced. I felt it land, not sharply, but thoroughly. I looked at her and saw something familiar. Confidence sharpened by an audience. I didn't interrupt. I didn't smile either. I just met her eyes and waited for the moment to pass, the way I always did. That's when I noticed Daniel. He wasn't laughing. His gaze had fixed on me with sudden intensity, his expression tightening, as if he were revising something in his mind. The color drained from his face so subtly most people missed it. But I didn't. He leaned forward slightly, breath caught between decision and disbelief. And in that fragile pause, before he spoke, the room felt unsteady, like a truth had surfaced too early, and no one knew what to do with it yet. Daniel didn't say anything right away. He just stared, as if the noise of the room had faded to a dull echo only he could hear. Mara, still riding the laugh she'd earned, didn't notice. She was already moving on, refilling glasses, basking in approval. I felt it then, that familiar tightening in my chest that comes when a private boundary is crossed in public. Not anger. Something colder, a recalibration. Daniel excused himself from the group and walked toward me with a stiffness that didn't match the celebration. Up close, I could see the tension in his jaw. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally spoke, his voice low and careful. "Can I ask you something?" he said. I closed the file carefully and logged the details, exactly as required. That evening, Daniel called. His voice was tight, controlled. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Off the record." "There is no off the record," I replied gently. He was silent for a moment. "Then I think I understand," he said. When I hung up, I stood by the window of my apartment and watched the city lights come on, one by one. Everything was still moving according to its rules, according to timing. And somewhere between my sister's certainty and Daniel's growing fear, the truth was positioning itself, quietly, patiently, waiting for the moment it could no longer be ignored. The wedding rehearsal was held 2 weeks later in a courthouse, adjacent chapel. Chosen for convenience, Mara said, though I suspected she liked the symbolism without understanding it. Marble floors, high ceilings, the faint echo of footsteps. I arrived early, as I always did, and took a seat near the back. Mara was already there, directing everyone with the ease of someone used to being obeyed. She looked perfect, composed, radiant, certain. When she saw me, her smile tightened just a fraction before settling back into place. Daniel avoided my eyes. The officiant hadn't arrived yet, so people milled about, voices low and reverent in a space that demanded restraint. My mother whispered instructions. My father checked his watch. Everything felt rehearsed, even the pauses. Daniel finally approached me when no one else was close enough to listen. "I received a notice today," he said quietly. "A scheduling conflict." I nodded. "That happens." "It listed your name," he continued, his voice barely steady. "With a title." I waited. He swallowed. "You're assigned to the bench next month." "Less," I said. The word landed between us, solid and final. He looked down at his hands, then back up at me, color draining from his face exactly the way it had at the party. "Mara doesn't know," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," I replied. "She never asked." The officiant arrived then, calling everyone to attention. Daniel stepped back into place beside my sister, his posture rigid, his mind clearly elsewhere. Mara glanced at him, annoyed. She glanced at me, dismissive. The rehearsal began. As they practiced vows, I watched my sister speak promises with confidence she'd never questioned. I wondered, briefly, what it would feel like to stand in a room where everyone believed the story you told about yourself. Then I let the thought pass. Belief isn't the same as truth. Afterward, there was a small gathering outside. Lauder returned, cautious but present. Someone joked about how serious the space felt. Mara laughed too loudly in response. At one point, she turned toward me, glass raised. "You see," she said, smiling. "Everything works out when people stick to their lanes." The words were meant to land softly. They didn't. I met her eyes. "Sometimes," I said evenly, "lanes intersect." She frowned, confused, already losing interest. Daniel wasn't confused. He watched me with something like dread now. Not fear of me, but fear of inevitability. He understood what my family never had, that silence can be authority, and restraint can be power. As the evening wound down, my mother came to stand beside me. "You've changed," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "You're just seeing me without the story." She didn't respond. I left early, stepping out into the cool air, the courthouse lights glowing steadily across the street. Tomorrow, everyone would return to planning flowers and seating charts. They would believe the balance had been restored. But balance isn't maintained by pretending. As I walked to my car, I felt no satisfaction, no anger, no urge to explain. Just a calm certainty, earned over years of being underestimated. Because when the truth finally speaks for itself, it doesn't need a voice. It only needs time.